Buenos dias, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for coming to the Internet Rights and Principles Coalition's formal meeting space. But we have also a wonderful opportunity to be talking about a topic which we have entitled, When Death Threats Go Viral, Defending Human Rights in the Face of Orchestrated Harassment Campaigns on Social Media, with Amnesty International Article 19 and Mexican bloggers, Charisma Foundation, and we're very, very happy to see we have Google represented here. I will introduce each panelist shortly, but first I'll make just a very brief introductory comment about the structure of today. This meeting marks 7 years since the beginning of the Internet Rights and Principles Dynamic Coalition's work on the Charter of Human Rights and Principles for the Internet. 2 copies in front of me in Spanish and English are here for viewing. We have it in 9 languages, and it has been used across different stakeholders and around the world to make a clear impact on not only human rights advocacy for the internet, but also for judiciaries, intergovernmental organizations, educational institutions, grassroots organizing. So, coming to today, considering that human rights have been formally recognized at the UN level, that all human rights existing offline should also apply online. This is the UN Human Rights Council's resolution of 2014. It is now time for concrete discussions on the roles and responsibilities of online service providers as well as regulators to ensure that human rights are protected and fulfilled in the online environment. So this meeting is one of our opportunities to provide a place where we can discuss the local human rights issues. We are in Mexico and Latin America, and to start thinking about concrete solutions that will enable human rights online to be protected in the same way as they are offline by law. Now, so that brings us to today. The first half of our the first 2/3 of our meeting will be this roundtable discussion, and that will take about an hour, and then please stay for the final half hour where we will look at the work of the IRP Coalition and think about next steps. But this meeting, as I said, has been organized by Amnesty International. It assembles members of the Internet Rights and Principles Coalition, invited human rights experts and activists, and our online service provider representative from Google. And we're going to be looking at issues such as cyber harassment and other emerging forms of techno-censorship. In particular today, we're looking at the growing trend in orchestrated troll networks on Twitter and elsewhere, and how online service providers, regulators, and civil society can manage these threats to ensure that people can converse, congregate, and learn and get access to information in a way that is safe, but also does not impede on the freedom of expression and the right to information. So these are quite complex issues. They're technical, they're ethical, they're legal. So I will turn now the roundtable discussion to our members, and we're going to look at these trends, particularly with respect to Mexico and other parts of the world. Right, let me introduce our main panelists. We have a large panel. It is a round table. Before I introduce each person in turn, the request is that each initial comment is brief, so that we can get as much interaction as possible. We have some slides so we can show you exactly what we're talking about. So first of all, to my here we have Tanya O'Carroll from Amnesty International. To her right, we have Alberto Escortio, is that correct? Yes. A blogger from Yo Soy Red, is that correct? Yeah. And we have Paulina... Paulina Gutierrez from Article 19, excuse my appalling pronunciation. We have Amalia Toledo from the Charisma Foundation here, and we're very happy to see Marcel Leonardi from Google. And here in the front we have Hanan Boujami, who is the co-chair of the Internet Rights and Principles Coalition, who has experience in other regions, particularly the Middle East and North Africa, and will speak to how what we're talking about today relates to the charter work. So I think, Tanya, I'll turn it over to you, and I'm the timekeeper and the moderator. If you have questions from the audience, of course, let us speak of a round of roundtable panelists first. Please, for the record, say who you are. Please keep your interventions short. so that we have time for everyone, and if we have remote participation, we will see as well. So thank you very much, Tanya.
Thank you, Marianne, and good morning, everybody. I want to just say thanks to the Internet Rights and Principles Coalition for allowing us to have this space, because I've been working in Mexico this year for 6 months with Amnesty International's Mexico Regional Office. I'm normally based in London as part of our technology and human rights team, and I was working a lot with Alberto here and Paulina in particular on what I think is a really striking and very, very concerning new trend that is very, very clear here in Mexico, but I think is also rearing its head in many other countries around the world. And it would have been a real shame not to be able to actually share some of their experiences about how they're tackling this issue, because I think us in civil society, but also regulators, governments, and companies are yet to really grasp the extent and the scale of what this trend looks like. And how we can begin to actually fight back against it, and what those kind of solutions look like. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about massive orchestrated disinformation campaigns run by troll farms. I think when we talk about harassment and abuse, we've traditionally thought about it as the troll, the kind of guy who's sat in his pants somewhere behind a computer, who spends his days getting a lot of joy out of vitriolic, hateful, aggressive attacks against individuals, particularly against women, against activists. For me, this is no longer what we mean when we're talking about trolls. What we're talking about is an actual market in misinformation, a commercialization of disinformation tactics, of defamation tactics, and of hate speech and aggressive, very violent death threats. And that's something that we're seeing very much here in Mexico. And who are these actors? It's very difficult to know, and I think that's one of the things we're going to be talking about a bit today. But what we do know about them is that they are small kind of PR companies that have sprung up in the last 3 or 4 years in Mexico. And they sell their services, a range of services, to really whoever will pay them. They're professionalized trolls. Alberto can talk a bit more about this, but one troll operator may be operating up to 150 accounts and being paid to do that by the hour. And what kind of services are they selling? They are selling, we can promise you to make your topic a trending topic, Mr. Government. We can get your issue. So they run propaganda machine, but they also spread fake news. They make up they seed lies and scandals about prominent critical voices in Mexico, so activists and journalists particularly, but human rights groups as well. And it's a whole ecosystem. It's no longer just trolls on Twitter. It's a whole ecosystem of fake blogs and news articles that are operating with a commercial background and benefiting, people profiting from it. So what can we do about it? I think I just want to reflect very quickly before I hand over to these guys. The human rights impact of this is serious, not only because it has a chilling effect, and I think obviously this is just a reflection on the online space of what already happens offline. Death threats, anybody who knows anything about Mexico knows that the situation for human rights in this country is very grave. It's one of the most dangerous countries to be a journalist, and now we're just seeing that transported into the online environment. But we're also, and I just an example of that is a journalist who recently told me she was thinking of leaving Twitter, and she said it's not self-censorship, it's self-protection. And I think that really sums it up, is that the chilling effect comes from the fact that these spaces, including Twitter, including Facebook, are no longer safe spaces to speak out about human rights violations. But at least we can see with the death threats where they're coming from. At least we can see them, and we can report them to Twitter through Twitter's process of reporting harassment. What's the more and maybe even more concerning side of all of this is the defamation and disinformation, which is so hard to put a finger on. And I'll give one really brief example. Vidulfo Rosales, who is the lawyer here of the Ayotzinapa case of the 43 missing students in Mexico, he had 2 leaked phone calls earlier this year, and they first spread out on Facebook. The first leaked phone call basically made it sound like he was receiving money from cartels. The second leaked phone call made it sound like he was making racial slurs about the victims' families, the 43 missing students. He is a prominent human rights lawyer in this country, an incredibly important part of the case on Ayotzinapa and getting justice for those families. And what happened? just at the moment where they were about to release a very important investigation. It's something here called the Expert Group on Ayotzinapa, had done a huge independent investigation. Just at that time, the leaked phone calls were released. What happened? El Universal, one of the biggest papers in Mexico, ran a spread for two days straight on their homepage about this scandal. It was picked up across the news. The trolls went crazy on Twitter. And at the time where we should have all been talking about the Ayotzinapa case and the substantive findings of this investigation, it was a huge distraction tactic, which took away from his team's ability to do their work, to do their advocacy around the case. In the press conference, people only wanted to talk about the scandal. And I think that kind of disinformation and defamation every day, and it is every day in Mexico, but it's not just in Mexico. We're seeing this in Russia, we're seeing this in Turkey. I think in the last few weeks we've seen this similar, although I don't want to say they're the same thing because I don't think that they are yet, in the Trump election. So I think, this orchestrated discreditment, defamation campaigns where online media and social media are no longer independent spaces, huge chilling effect for freedom of expression, and I think it's a trend that we're yet to really grasp. I'm going to stop there because I don't want to speak too long, and Alberto's actually going to show you a lot about how the trolls work in Mexico, and then pass on to Paulina.
Thanks, Alberto.
I'm going to speak in Spanish.
Sorry, just for a moment, Alberto, yeah.
Sorry, we forgot to mention that we'd hoped that there was a simultaneous translation here, and there isn't. So we're going to have to do a kind of like on-the-cuff thing.
We will try.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, thank you. Voy a contar una corta historia para entender por qué hay tanta censura en Internet en México y estas tácticas.
I'm going to tell a little
de
story about
información.
why there's so much techno-censorship and where these tactics are in Mexico.
Y desde hace 4 años le hemos llamado, quienes hemos participado, la batalla de la tecnopolítica. ¿Pueden presentar el slide, por favor? Okay. Le hemos llamado la batalla entre la tecnopolítica contra la tecnocensura.
This is the battle between the politics of the technopolitics and techno-censorship. This is what he's calling the battle. Oh, great.
Okay. So, Internet en México ha jugado un papel muy importante. Si todos recuerdan, en 2009 hubo un brote de la influenza, del virus de la influenza, y ese año se dio uno de los primeros movimientos en red que articuló a decenas de miles de personas, de bloggers, de personas organizándose para informar.
Okay, people have been organizing since 2009, which began with an influenza
De un virus.
virus. And since then, mobilizations and organizations in online and media platforms are becoming and have been crucial.
Y desde el 2009 hasta hoy ha habido cerca de 10 u 11 movimientos en red masivos, el último de 8 millones de cuentas de Twitter participando, que fue Ya Me Cansé.
The last that had at least 8 million,
Yeah.
8 million followers, it was Ya Me Cansé. It's a hashtag that was assigned to a public official investigating the Ayotzinapa case in Mexico.
Internet nos ha ayudado a conectarnos, a movilizarnos, porque no tenemos acceso a los medios tradicionales de comunicación. Por
So
eso
the internet
Internet,
helped to be a really important mobilizing force because they didn't have, because the internet was the main way that the protests were organized.
y principalmente las redes sociales. Pero en paralelo a esta historia hay otra historia, la del lado oscuro.
But behind that story of how they were using the internet in a positive way was another story, the dark side.
El lado oscuro es que la respuesta de intereses que están en contra de que nos organicemos en Internet comienza en 2012, cuando un ejército de 30,000 bots participaron para cambiar el sentido de las votaciones.
So the response of certain interests in Mexico really began to fight back and claim the spaces starting in 2012, where 30,000 bots suddenly appeared on the network.
Sin embargo, hoy en día ya no existen más bots, ahora han evolucionado en sus técnicas, usan algoritmos muy complejos para simular mensajes de personas reales.
They've evolved their tactics using very complex tactics now. Basically, they appear more like real people instead of spam bots.
Entonces, en 2013, junto a estos ataques de trolls, también inauguramos la era del espionaje masivo en México, siendo México el principal cliente de Fin Fisher en el mundo.
So then in 2014, did you say 2014?
Yeah.
Mexico obviously becomes very well known for buying Fin Fisher and so taking back control of the social networks.
Sin embargo, cuando pensamos que no se podía poner peor, en 2014 inauguramos una tercera era, que es el uso de amenazas masivas
And then
contra activistas
when we
y
thought it
periodistas.
couldn't get any worse, we see another third stage using massive attacks on social media.
Y eso significa que tu teléfono suena 200, 300 veces con mensajes de muerte, con imágenes de gente muerta.
Your phone would be ringing 200 times with updates showing images of dead people with death threats going viral.
Cada año han evolucionado.
Every year they've evolved
Eh,
their tactics.
Yo acabo de regresar de estar refugiado en España. No queremos averiguar qué va a pasar en 2016 y no queremos averiguar cómo van a escalar en 2017.
I've just come back from a period in Spain, and I don't want to imagine what is going to come next for 2017 and how these tactics are going to keep evolving.
Por favor, consideren que en México estamos viviendo una especie de futuro del mundo. Aquí estamos viviendo lo que va a pasar en sus países. Si bien ahora Trump y en China y en Rusia están usando bots, lo que pasó aquí hace 4 años, aquí vamos avanzando un poco más.
We're going to see these tactics. Ashley, can you translate? I didn't get it quite right.
Okay.
I'm going to.
What is happening in Mexico, Alberto says that it's something that is going to evolve and happen all around the world. Now that with Trump's victory and Russia involved in all this technology evolve and revolution on elections, because in 2017 and 2018 we will have presidential elections in Mexico.
¿Cuál es el peligro del uso de trolls y de las amenazas? No es un tema nada más de Internet, tiene efectos en el mundo real. Y voy a mostrar un par de ejemplos.
It's not just an issue on the internet. These has real effects in the real world, and he's going to show a couple of examples.
Este primer ejemplo es cuando el presidente Peña Nieto visita Londres en 2013, me parece.
President Peña Nieto, the president of Mexico, visits London in 2013.
Y el centro son los activistas y periodistas que cubrían las protestas que hubo en Londres en contra de él.
The center is the activists and journalists who are covering his journey to London and protesting it.
Y el cinturón rojo, que está marcado con color rojo,
And
son cerca de 20,000 cuentas de bots que en ese momento silenciaron las protestas y evitaron que fuera un trending topic.
The red belt around the edge is how many? 20,000 bots who were basically trying to sabotage the protest, the organic protest that was happening on the network, and suppress it.
Eso provocó que nunca se supiera esas protestas y causó mucho desánimo, detenciones, espionaje. Y el siguiente ejemplo es en 2014, donde ya no se usaban bots, sino una mezcla de bots y trolls.
So now they're using a mixture of the bots. This is the next example, Yami Kansei, which was already mentioned. This is the wave of protests that happened in 2014 against Ayotzinapa. And this is now they've evolved their tactics. They're not just the spam bots. And I'll just add one quick thing. Spam bots basically are when they're just empty tweets. It's just it's somebody running a lot of accounts just sending empty tweets in order just to block the channel of the protesters. A botnet, exactly, literally. It's just to push out and suppress information, get things pushed off trending topics, because Twitter then blocks them. They've now evolved their tactics in 2014 in the Yame Kansei, and they're using a mixture of the botnet and the spam bots with these kind of trolls, which are now real people commanding the accounts, which are much harder to block.
I'm going to use the laser. So, esta figura son 75,000 cuentas de bots.
That's 65,000 bots.
Y lo que vemos aquí es una batalla, porque estos bots lograron que Yame Kansei desapareciera de los trending topics.
So that center bit is where the battle is happening between the bots, which is the green bit, and the
People.
Yami Kansei protests, who are just organic social movements using the hashtag Yami Kansei.
Entonces, el lado positivo de esto es que la gente con inteligencia colectiva decidió crear otro trending topic para darle la vuelta, para defenderse.
So the collective intelligence of the organic network, the people who were just protesting, realized what was happening when they were being flooded with this huge orchestrated attack, and so they adapted, and they created Yami Kansei 2, a new hashtag.
Eso fue en 2014, cuando todavía había esperanzas de ganar estas batallas.
This was in 2014 when we still thought we could win the battles by adapting.
Pero en el año pasado, en 2015, tuvimos una evolución de la repulsión,
But last year there was another evolution in 2015.
y es que las amenazas pasaron de Internet a recibir ataques en la calle, y Andrea Noel es el primer
They
caso de que
moved from
estas...
the internet into attacks in the street, starting with threats online and then became real physical threats. And this
Andrea Noel es periodista de
Andrea
Vice.
Noelia, she's a journalist.
Y aparte de recibir cerca de 2,000 amenazas de muerte a través de Twitter,
She received 2,000 death threats through
también
Twitter,
recibió ataques en la calle,
She also
visitas a su
started
casa, seguimientos.
receiving them on the streets and people coming to her house, following her.
Seguramente continuaremos buscando maneras de expresarnos libremente, de protestar y de contar lo que pasa, pero necesitamos la ayuda del mundo para defendernos y para contar lo que está pasando.
Of course, we're going to keep on adapting and looking for ways to express ourselves online, but we need everybody to know about this and there to be a force around the world in order to try and address it, because at the moment we are losing the battle.
Cierro con este pedido de ayuda.
I'll finish with this
que-
little...
Aunque parece que está todo perdido en México, hay personas que queremos seguir, pues que haya libertad, que haya democracia, y la atención del mundo es muy importante para esto. Muchas gracias.
Okay, he's asking and calling the international community to put the eye on Mexico and how this is happening, and it's going to happen all over around the world. And he's very thankful for letting him talk in this panel.
Big- Muchas gracias, Alberto, and much strength to you.
Gracias.
Yeah. I will now ask Paulina to take the floor on behalf of Article 19. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to thank very much to the Internet Rights and Principles Coalition, Tanya, for letting us talk here, because Mexican civil society, not only Article 19 as a Mexican office, had not had this opportunity to talk at IGF. So we're really thankful for that, and thank you for listening. And I would like to begin mentioning the first paragraph of a public statement that we did, these Mexican civil society organizations participating in 2016 IGF. We want to denounce the severe and systematic human rights violations within the territory of the host country, forced disappearance, torture, violence against women, and the murder of 99 journalists. This year is that the year that we have the most high number of journalists murdered, and we have 10 journalists, and they are happening in total and complete impunity. And when impunity rules is when online platforms and social media become crucial to keep, or trying to keep building democracy in a country as Mexico. In such context, offline and online realities are connected. And in Mexico, we're seeing a growing number of digital attacks, not only against the websites of independent media that are actually covering these public interest matters that traditional media are not covering anymore, and grassroots collectives. There are also the online threats against journalists, human rights defenders, and this is actually an attempt to restrict democracy and critical voices online. Article 19 has documented in 2015 30 cases of digital attacks and censorship. There are malware injections, attempts to break passwords against journalists and human rights defenders. And this digital realm has also become a catalyst of new norms of violence against these actors, particularly affecting women, where physical and tech-related violences are interlinked and interchangeable. So the threats that Alberto just exposed are the most common aggressions against journalists and women today. This year, we are documenting them, and we are aware that this is a real challenge. Because as civil society, we need to build the technical capacity, because victims commonly come to us and want to know which is the IP address of the people, because they are also attacking on their anonymity, and it's not that anonymity is a bad thing, but it's actually that we need the prosecution to be effective. And if we're in a country where impunity is the rule, how are we going to manage with these investigations? And actually, what we have is that prosecutors think that online threats or online attacks are not important. So we think that we really believe in Article 19 that a death threat or a rape threat that is becoming viral online cannot be less convenient than any other crime that happens in the offline world. And that is something that we have been pushing and trying to raise awareness of. So I would like to end with this and thank you a lot again for sharing the panel.
Okay, muchas gracias, Paulina. Thank you. We're now going to turn to Amalia Toledo from the Charisma Foundation to continue on this theme. Thank you. And I'll give her, there's a roaming mic.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. Well, are you listening to me? Yes? Okay. Just a few things. What we share with Mexico is a human rights crisis as well in Colombia. High rates of impunities and a lot of violence against human rights defenders and journalists. But what differentiates us is like we have been in an armed conflict for 50 years. So the situation in Mexico is completely different from Mexico, although we share all this. And this armed conflict has undermined human rights very deeply. And one thing are the big cities, and the other thing is where the conflict is still alive, you know, where the people really feel the country. So additionally to this context, we have to make clear that internet connection is very different depending from where you are in the country. So that's maybe a huge difference with Mexico in terms that we haven't identified these trends of harassment campaign. That goes beyond bots, using bots. However, in the last presidential election, we suspect that one of the candidates used the services of a hacker to influence through bots and fake accounts on social media the public opinion. So in a matter of maybe few months, we're probably gonna see stuff like the ones that we heard here from our colleagues here. I'm pretty sure because whatever is identified in one Latin American country is going to happen or is already happening in the other countries. So I'm pretty sure we're gonna very soon identify these trends. But you know, the armed conflict is affecting particularly human rights defenders and journalists that has been historically victims of violence. Although now we haven't seen the death of journalists as in the past, and what is happening here in Mexico that is increasing, that is a totally different thing that is happening now in Colombia. This year, more than 60 human rights defenders has been killed. The rate on death of human rights defenders, violence death, of course, on human rights defenders has increased while journalists is decreasing. And what we see here is that we cannot say that their activism online is not affecting or is not putting more pressure under these groups, because it is. But the thing is that, as I say, internet connection is different when you go to these difficult places in Colombia. When you are in a area that is affected, directly affected by the armed conflict, the penetration of internet is very low. So activists are not necessarily, we cannot put the fault, to say it in a way, to internet, because not necessarily, they are not using, and grassroots organizations are not necessarily using technology and the internet as a way of doing activism, but those that are doing it are not aware of the risk. So they are more vulnerable than those that are not using it. But in addition, we have identified in Charisma, in work we have done with journalists, with women journalists, that the threats for them are way more higher than the ones for male or men journalists. And the discourse or the narrative is because they are not only journalists, but they are women. No, so they are getting more threats that are related with their personal relationship, with their appearance, with the supposedly lack of capacity for being woman. And when a woman is being very critical to any subject of interest in the country, she is going to be slaughtered basically online. But we still haven't identified a campaign behind just to attack a person or an organization. But I'm pretty sure that it's a matter of time that this is happening, because it's already, we have the suspect, and there's haven't been proof completely, but this election, as I say, was using this kind of services. So we seem that this is going to happen, and we have to join forces to look for solutions to this trend.
Okay, gracias. Thank you very much. So let us turn to our panelist, Marcel Leonardi from Google. Marcel, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thanks. It's very refreshing to be on a panel that's really diverse. It's so rare to be on a panel where men are the minority, so thank you for putting that together as well, sadly. But one thing that I would like to highlight, I work for Google in public policy in Brazil. And sadly, the situation is not exactly that different. I mean, obviously, you may have heard the reports of journalists being murdered, of websites being taken down, and all of the campaigns against specific Twitter and public figures. So, we do believe that technology can help a little bit. Not sure how many of you are familiar with a project that we launched in Latin America called Project Shield. If you haven't visited that, it's the website, actually, let me get the URL correct, projectshield.withgoogle.com. Basically, it's a website. It's a program that allows journalists and news websites to use Google infrastructure and technology to protect their sites from the DDoS attacks. Basically, one tactic that we have seen, particularly in the region, is rather than trying to go through courts or any kind of due process systems, we actually see powerful figure trying to censor bloggers and trying to censor websites in general using DDoS attacks. I distinctly remember one case in Brazil where a specific prominent public figure, a former Brazilian senator, wanted to censor a specific news website that was against his views, his ideas, that kind of thing. And essentially he asked several lawyers how much it would cost, and then suddenly nobody heard from him again. And what happened was he actually found a couple of people to actually attack the site with DDoS attacks, and he was even quoted on the press saying, yeah, it was actually cheaper to do that than go through the legal process. So it's a real problem that exists, and Google is trying to help in that sense. It's a free program. Anybody can apply as long as you qualify as a news organization or a journalist or a blogger or a news organization, which is harder to define these days. And it's something that's, I think that we're willing to emphasize that it exists, is available for people. The second thing, just a quick example from Brazil, what we have noticed that touches on the point that was addressed earlier is the issue of self-censorship. Basically, a lot of people were afraid for their lives, as it was mentioned here. So people not only just leave social media, they actually just abandon YouTube channels, they stop publishing, and then you start thinking, what happened to them? Maybe they got tired of publishing. No, they got threats, and the threats can be of several different consequences. What I mean by that is, what we see there is lots of lawsuits being filed by several different people against the same blogger, the same journalist, the same Twitter account or something like that. And what's ended up happening is, obviously, that person is buried under the costs of the legal proceedings. Basically, he or she cannot really have the means to fight back in court. So we're starting giving support to organizations in the region as well that are able to fight back and actually cover the costs of those legal proceedings for some of these folks as well. So this is just something I wanted to highlight real quickly. I know people want to go into the debate, so thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. So we can now open to the floor. Do people have comments or questions from the floor to our panelists, or anything they would like to add to the information we're sharing here? Yes, thank you. Could you say your name for the record, please? And just wait for the mic, thanks.
Oh, hi, my name is Marcela Calle. I'm from Colombia, but I work for Internews. Actually, what Maria was saying right now, we just recently saw it at the peace agreements elections. The campaign for the no spread a lot of misinformation. For example, they said that they get a picture from where President Santos was with the FARC leader, and they put like a fake message, and that image became viral. Also, with the internet, the low internet penetration, they really know what we're doing, because in the towns, like, they spread like different message according to the regions. In some regions, they say, "Oh, we're going to become same as Venezuela," or "We're going to," and using the accent, and also targeting, for example, if the internet penetration were low, they were using like radio stations, local radio stations, so to spread misinformation. So we are also seeing that happening very recently in Colombia with the peace agreement, and they won. Like, they now won with a lot of misinformation.
Thanks very much. So a very strong theme that is coming out is how sophisticated these strategies and tools are becoming, and they're in fact using a commercial approach called glocalization to be very aware of global differences, and very targeted and very, very clever. Are there any more comments or examples from the floor? I think it would be very useful today to gather information for the official transcript. Thank you.
Yeah.
But please, your name for the record and where you're from.
Yeah, this is Sahasman Shrestha from Nepal. Yeah, I'm executive board member of Freedom Forum. So what I'm thinking of is, we have lots of access and lots of technology with internet, but when like a journalist, I'm basically a journalist, so we are very scared to spread a real news, because everybody is threatening us, and we have a kind of self-censorship. The self-censorship gives you the very sad story for the journalists, that they are not able to give a real story, real news, because of all the penetration and all the impunity activities throughout the journalism practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very important point. So this also is happening in Nepal. Any other comments? Thank you from the floor.
Hi, my name is Abhilash Nair. I'm from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow in Scotland, where I'm Deputy Director of the Centre for Internet Law and Policy. Some of the things that panelists raised here actually highlight a fact that cyberspace is no longer a separate entity as it used to be perceived in the early days of the internet, and it's very much part of the real world. And what makes it even more difficult from a human rights perspective is that the kind of things you were mentioning with harassment and trolling, that actually carries on as a 24-hour activity. You know, so just to give an example, bullying is not new. Children, always been bullied at schools, but that used to stop before the internet when the child came back home. But this now carries on to the bedroom. At larger scale, the examples you were talking about from Mexico, that the 24-hour onslaught makes it even more challenging to address. And I'm completely with you on the human rights implications of that. But the basic point I was trying to make was, I think it's about time we stopped looking at cyberspace as a virtual separate space, and it needs to be seen as part of the real world. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Important point. Can you hear? Is my mic on? Yeah? No, my mic's not on. Hello? Moderator needs her mic. Okay. Just anyone else from the floor?
We have another one.
Ah, yes, thank you.
Hello, I'm Jesus Lau. I'm from Mexico, and I represent the International Federation of Library Associations. I'm a librarian myself. So the first thing I would say, thank you for sharing this information. In many cases, it's new to me, all these strategies. And I would like to make two comments. One, it would be great for you to prepare guidelines for average citizens, on how to identify these attacks. Because for people that, one that is not a computer specialist, it will be difficult to spot, when. It happens in my own state. I come from Veracruz, and for those who are from Mexico, the situation that the state is going through. So this is the first comment. The second one, in regard to journalists and freedom of expression, I guess the greatest challenge that Mexico is facing is the drug cartels. They are the ones that are killing most of the journalists. If they dare to speak about what they do, they usually, in great danger. Okay. I think in the case of the government, there are, legal frameworks to do and to counteract whatever government does. But in the case of the drug cartels, I don't see any solution, to really confront them or to find a solution. So, conclusion, thank you for doing the job. It would be great if you could educate us on how to identify this. Thank you.
Can I?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Is this? No. Okay. Can I use this one? Yeah. I.
Mike.
Okay, so
This is work. This is no.
Our table mics aren't working.
We can just talk loudly.
okay, yeah, it's working now.
Okay, thanks.
Well, yeah, I just want to add something to what you mentioned about drug cartels. I think that we need to also realize that in a country as Mexico, you cannot find a clear difference between officials or public officials and drug cartels. I mean, if they are operating, it's because they are being allowed to operate. And I mean, that's why impunity and prosecution has been so difficult in Mexico. And as journalists, and linking it with the online world, is how are we going to control? And it's not that, I think that it's not that we don't have the measures to control it. It's a case of justice and rule of law that is not being guaranteed and effective in Mexico.
Thank you very much, which is segue a lead into, I think, where we need to consider for the rest of this session, for this roundtable, is what next? Yeah. Next steps, in light of who is legally accountable and who is in fact accountable. So the tension between what really is happening on the ground. I think we've had one suggestion about guidelines. Let's hold that and come back to it. But before we look at practical solutions to help support and also call to account both the private sector and the public sector, and to see how the private sector can help. I'd like to ask Hanan Boujimi if she has anything to add in terms of her work with the rights in the Middle East and North African area, because we are now considering the issues around the world. Hanan, do you have any points you want to make? Mike, you need a mic. If you don't mind turning around so people can see you, the camera.
Well, no, I mean, thank you very much to the panelists and for Marianne also for organizing the session, and our colleague Minda, who is not here with us today. She's in the UK at the moment. I think, you know, you bring, you know, a bleak picture about how the internet is being used at the moment for various reasons. And I think what we try to do in our dynamic coalition is to highlight the importance of principles, and that's why we have a booklet that we produce with a charter, and that is translated to different languages. But the charter and the principles are black and white. How can we make them more concrete, and how can they be more practically used by different policymakers, you know, and organizations in this field? The situation in the Middle East is a little bit different. You know, we do not have drug cartels, for example, as you have here. We do not have trolling human rights defenders on Twitter and, you know, deploying bots to make some noise, you know, on these channels where freedom of speech is being kind of trotted. We do have other issues with ISIS, for example, with violence, with extremism, with, you know, the war, civil war in Syria and so on. So there is an intersection between regions, but I cannot really relate to the problems that you are highlighting here. And it's good that we're here in Mexico in the context where we can actually have a completely different overview of what's at stake in this region. And for what we heard so far, there is a lot at stake. You know, it affects professional journalists, women, you know, dissidents and human rights defenders, and we should do something about that. And definitely principles are there, you know, they can help us set a framework to do our work, but to what extent we are in a position to influence policymakers, and that's where the bulk work actually is needed, you know. The media is doing, I mean, its job maybe at the local level, but these issues are not really visible in the international agenda, and we're very happy that the Dynamic Coalition on Internet Rights and Principles is in a position to provide a platform for all these people to come to speak about these issues. Now, so the solution, it's a long, maybe mile objective, or it's like a long shot, as we say, in Europe, but definitely we should start from somewhere. So we do have these principles which can help us set a framework. We try to do a lot of work to translate, to actually even put them in a context. For example, in the Middle East, we led a campaign, it was called Click Rights. It basically transformed the principles into concepts that people, citizens, you know, people in the Middle East will actually understand and are able to digest. Now, let's be honest, knowledge about internet rights is not widespread. So we really have to do a lot of work, background work, to bring people to the picture beyond human rights defenders and journalists and so on. So you need to have a platform where you can have discourse with people who actually understand what you're talking about. And that's where the bulk of the work that we've been doing is just engagement and bridging the knowledge gap about internet and internet principles and rights and so on. So I think we are on the right track. I'm glad that this IGF, for the first time, I mean, going through all IGFs since 2006, this is the first time that I hear a lot of people actually wanting to have a multi-stakeholder dialogue. You know, if you go back to the transcripts of the IGF in 2006, the first one I've been to, you will see how the discussion evolved. Now it's really good that we managed to get a lot of people from different, you know, backgrounds and platforms who are here, and we need to start talking about these things. Now the next step is to get the elephant, you know, where is the elephant? It's not in the room at the moment, the government. So we need to bring that stakeholder so we can have a candid conversation about, you know, what needs to be done practically to solve all these issues. We're very happy that Google accepted, you know, to come here. So we have a very important stakeholder, and that is the private sector. And now the work is how to get, you know, who is not here in the room to listen to what's going on, so we can address these issues more practically. Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you very much, Hanan. So just to, do we have a comment from the floor? Two comments. And then in order to keep us focused after that on what next, because as Hanan has said, you have to start somewhere. And also because if these tools are so sophisticated, so nuanced, and so diverse, then our responses need to be nuanced, sophisticated, and diverse. And never say never. So before we round up, we will do that. I will have 3 more comments from the floor. Have I got that right? 1, 2, 3. Then the panel can quickly respond. And then we'll do a brainstorm for our rapporteur about next steps, possible steps and ideas. Is that clear? So in turn, the speakers from the floor, then the panel, quick response. Is that okay? Yeah, we'll do it. We'll manage. It can happen. And so go, please. Please, your name for the record.
Yes, I'm Dragana Kaurin from Localization Lab. Just to add a quick comment to Hanan, there's an account of Bana Alabed from Aleppo, a 7-year-old girl whose mother manages her account. It's been really all over the news this past week that the account got shut down. And for 2 days, everyone was wondering, did she die? Was she killed? While she's not part of a larger human rights network, she's an activist. She's putting out images and giving stories of life inside Aleppo that are really important. She seems to be okay, but she's been hacked and trolled and attacked. And actually, I have too. Anytime I repost something from White Helmets or any news in Aleppo, I didn't realize you could get so many like tweets with my face and random information on it in 1 hour. And it's scary, and it shuts me up, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. But yeah, exactly. But while it's not cartels, it's a different problem altogether. And I'm going to guess by the Russian and Syrian flag in the logo, it was probably a Russo-Syrian hacker that was doing that.
Thank you. It's an important point about people are human rights defenders without necessarily being identified as such, and this is the people we need to see, hear about.
The girl in red.
The girl, the young woman in red here at the front first. Oh no, that's okay. We'll go to you. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
I'm Jirnut from Thailand. I would like to update some situation in Thailand right now. I think the most important issue in Thailand that related to the internet right is about the silent the citizen. We've been restrict for the access to information and by censorship. Firstly, the people enjoy the freedom of expression online, and then we got backlash, the slap back into the legal allegation. Lately, the level of the censor is going to, if you just click like or to some influencer on the social media, the police can come to visit you and have some kind of the interrogation. So it's already outlawed by the government.
Thanks so much to remind us that even clicking like can be life-threatening. So next speaker from the floor, thank you.
Hello, I'm Yolanda from South Africa. Well, back home we don't really have the situation at this scale. But I mean, social media has been used obviously to organize and bring about social awareness and in terms of political issues. However, what we're facing right now is a government which is trying to regulate the internet. So with this type of issue, at one hand you want to protect freedom of expression, but at the same time limit it. So then in terms of going forward, how do we balance the two? So because these people look legit, or these hackers look legit, how do we, it's a very fine line. So even it's a discussion back home, because the government wants to regulate, but we're like, whoa, what does this mean really? So in this context as well, going forward, how do we approach that? And as the speaker said, it's much more nuanced than just saying, cut these people out, whereas it's also limiting freedom of expression. Thank you.
Thank you, very good point. Anyone else from the floor? Had there? Okay. Oh, one more from the floor. our panelists have some responses ready. Alberto, does he want to?
Hello, I'm Jan from the French Digital Council. I would have a remark and an open question. You were mentioning the accountability of some actors, and I was wondering if the platforms that are used by these actors aren't also should be more accountable in a way. The more traditional way to approach it is to say they should block some bots, etc. But more generally, what is the responsibility of the business models of which they are built? For example, Facebook, you clearly see how the content is regulated, how it has triggered the emergence of digital labor, of click farms, of troll farms, and they are also benefiting from this market. So I think the asymmetrical way of organizing content of these platforms, where the users have not much power on how to decide what they see, but where it's only based off private marketplaces, it's also in a way triggering these kind of deviations.
Thank you very much. A very important point. I think we will turn to our Google representative. Marcel, we're not asking you to speak for every service provider, but it is, as you know, a burning question about the business model itself. So just let him have the mic, and then I'll turn to you.
That's an excellent question, especially because, as you said, the business model of pretty much all online companies is usually based on advertising in general. So, as you said, I cannot obviously speak for other companies in the private sector, but what Google has done, for example, with the whole fake news cycle that you may have seen, is exactly that. Just it was mentioned that it's a commercial enterprise for some people to create these troll, these bot accounts. It's also a commercial enterprise that happens to organize all these fake news websites. So what Google has done is actually changed the way that advertising can be shown on these fake news websites, which means they will not. Basically, the ad revenue is being cut off from these websites, which basically, since they live off and thrive on clicks, essentially, if you click and there are no advertising there, basically, there's no way for them to continue making money based on fake news. So that's one way that technology and companies can address this. Of course, I see that most of the issues here have been raised by Twitter. It's a pity that they probably couldn't be here for some reason. Not sure if they were invited. I want to get into that. But my point being, it's obviously not a one-stop solution, right? I mean, essentially, there's no magical bullet that technology can create and pretty much improve everything. Obviously, without the help from civil society to identify these things, companies can obviously not tweak their algorithms or change things the way they work. And Google, for example, does that all the time. I'm not sure if people are aware of this, but for example, on any given year, Google actually makes hundreds and hundreds of changes to the search algorithm exactly because it's an ongoing battle. People trying to move up with results with fake things and bad results and things like that, and the company trying to identify these things. But obviously, whoever is involved in any given issue will have a much quicker response.
Thank you very much. So in a sense, we have a very clear, one clear solution is Google not to allow these click farms to gain access and get revenue. So that's a very concrete. Thank you very much. We also had an earlier suggestion about guidelines for activists, particularly, I know Amnesty is working on guidelines on how to, and other NGOs on how to be careful online if you are a human rights activist and a journalist, but perhaps some guidelines for this area. I'm going to ask the panelists to make a comment response, and if possible, to add to some of the concrete solutions. We're brainstorming at this point. So I think that's a powerful moment for us right now. I think, Tanya, you wanted to respond to something, and then each one of you in turn.
Well,
Thank
yeah,
you.
I mean, I think you summed it up very well in terms of this trade-off. When we first started looking into this problem, we were very, very clear that we felt that Twitter should be doing a lot more and had a responsibility to doing a lot more in terms of changing its algorithm to isolate and block basically the spam bots. Of course, that works when they're spam bots. It doesn't work when they're trolls. And they're quite clear that they don't want to be the judges, and I agree with that. That it'd be very problematic if they were to be the judges of what's legitimate expression and who is a troll in a country like Mexico with such a complex ecosystem of actors. Alberto spends his time literally trolling through, wrong use of word, thousands and thousands of tweets every day in order to try and identify these actors. And you have incredible expertise on it, but could Twitter ever have that level of expertise? I think it's an interesting question. In terms of the solution, one thing I do ask of Twitter, and one thing I think that really has to be done, is putting more resources into investigating. Because it's clear that there's got to be a regulatory response. It's clear that governments have to respond to this as well. It's not only for the actual companies and the platforms themselves. And to do that, we need information. And in trying to investigate these actors, it has been so difficult because we have such an impartial view and visibility of the network. And it comes to questions about, like, you've had the same thing when trying to report cases, but IP addresses, who are the actors, when they're blocked and they pop up with the same IP address. We can infer things. When you have all of the data, you can infer a lot. And we need access to that data. And unfortunately, at the moment, we can only see their activities. We can't see and can't plot and can't actually expose the actors who are behind. And I think that's got to be something that governments and companies do together. I think it was quite interesting to see yesterday. I mean, I don't know how I feel about it yet, but the recent Google, Facebook, Twitter combine on ISIS content and creating hashes of content and a big database, essentially, that they agree this video is bad, so it can't be reshared afterwards. And I think similar kind of strategies that involve multi-companies working together, plus governments, plus, obviously us as actors just constantly pushing for this and exposing the actual human rights issues behind.
Thank you. Amalia and Paulina and perhaps Alberto, any comments?
When we are talking about public policy and legislation, I think we have to work on how to make closer, how to close the gap between narrative, or have to build a new narrative where the positions or the point of view of the freedom of expression advocates do not clash with the victims, and the same way, and the other way around, because we need to make suggestions to legislators that can put together these two, some in the middle, I don't know, because sometimes freedom of expression is like, don't touch freedom of expression, but we need a solution for this, for activists and human rights defenders that are victims of this. So we need to go to the middle point on this. I think that's important. And the other thing, one thing that we have identified, at least in Colombia, and so with some other Latin American techies, is that they are not thinking that their work has to do with human rights, and we're trying to raise awareness among them. Like, you have to come to the discussion. We need you in the discussion because you are the one developing all the algorithm, and if you are not thinking on human rights, we are not going to find a solution. So that's another thing that I wanted to share.
Thank you very much. Paulina.
Yeah, and I think that we also need to recognize the complexity of this ecosystem. We need to recognize that we all speak different languages, and I'm not talking about Spanish or English. I'm talking about how engineers at ICANN or IGF, they are trying to develop things, and we also need to go to them and explain why human rights are important in their work. The same as private sector. If they are approaching to us and they want to know, but how can we help? Because our business models is one limit, but we are also liable for human rights obligations and protection, or respect. But we need to keep and maintain these kind of discussions at IGF too. I know that this year the framework was enabling the environment and under the Sustainable Development Goals, but we had not. Freedom of expression is one of the main topics that needs to be still under discussion at IGF. So thank you again for letting us.
Thank you. And Alberto.
Dos cosas en español.
Sí.
Yeah.
Two things in Spanish.
Primero responderle a usted. cómo detectar este tipo de comportamientos en la red.
Responding to this gentleman here, how do you detect the behavior on the networks?
Al principio era fácil, en 2012 era muy fácil porque eran mensajes repetidos y podíamos detectarlo.
In 2012, it was really easy because they were just repetitive message and it was easy to detect them.
Ahora cada vez es más complejo, es a través de algoritmos, y cada vez que ellos avanzan, nosotros avanzamos.
Every time they change now, it's getting more complicated because they change. Twitter adjusts the algorithms and they adapt again.
Pero la única manera en la que hemos podido darle la vuelta a este tipo de ataques es enseñándole a la gente cómo reaccionar ante ellos.
The only way we've been able to have a strategy to kind of advance is to decime otra vez, se me olvidó.
Cómo responder y fortalecer lo que
The
ellos quieren
people,
hacer.
how they can respond in the face of these kinds of attacks, and that's been where we can advance.
En 2014 desarrollamos esta guía, la pongo en la cámara.
In 2014, we developed this guide. I'm going to put it in front of the camera.
Son 10 pasos para hacerle frente a un ataque de bots.
10 steps of how to defend yourself against an attack by bots or trolls.
Y de esa manera, como no tuvieron resultados, quebraron esas empresas y ya no volvieron a actuar más en México. Ese tipo de cosas podemos desarrollar.
We have developed these kinds of things, basically. And what did you say? ¿Qué dijo sobre las empresas?
Que quienes ya no pueden hacer negocio porque...
Okay, muchas gracias. This has been, I think, an extraordinary, amazing panel. Just a somber, the dark side of what we do every day. But I'm finding it also inspiring. This is the work of the Internet Rights and Principles Coalition, also other coalitions in the Internet Governance Forum. We have the Charter of Human Rights and Principles for the Internet, and these sorts of panels allow us to think about how to implement and to ground these rights-based principles into real-life experience and then to move forward with real-life solutions. We're just going to segue now into our meeting, but before you go, the meeting will be like this. To let you know what we're doing in the next 2 days, Hanan Boujemi will be telling us about the main session presentation from the IRP Coalition, a very exciting development in terms of a study guide. And we also have a lightning session at 10 to 1, 10 to 2, 13 hours 50, 10 to 2 tomorrow in the open forum space. And this builds on work we have been doing through the European Dialogue on Internet Governance, again around the Charter work, but with starting a new conversation about the connection between Internet access, design and terms of use, and the policy decisions that are made with respect to refugees, migrants, and newcomer populations. So please join us. The question is, what does Internet governance have to do with refugees? 20 minutes lightning session. You have 1 minute to answer that question. Please join us. It will be very interesting. Thank you for being here today. Please, if you feel comfortable, please stay so we can move into our business meeting and you'll learn more about the IIP Coalition. I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our wonderful panelists and wish them strength in their work. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mary.
Quería contar las dos historias.